What's going on, everybody? It is that time again, the Sooners Illustrated Podcast, episode 95 on this Tuesday, July 2nd, 2024, 59. We're in the 50s now, 59 days until the start of the 2024 season for Oklahoma. We are getting ready. It is July. That means Oklahoma is officially, finally, years in the making in the SEC. It was a crazy day in Norman yesterday. Tom's ready. He's been SEC ready. It was a crazy day in Norman yesterday. Events going all day long. All the coaches spoke in some capacity on SEC Network. We got to speak with Joe Castiglione and President Harris along with Greg Sankey. We're going to recap that all and kind of talk about what stuck out from the day yesterday as a historic day, honestly, obviously in college sports and certainly in Norman yesterday. OU has stayed hot on the recruiting trail. A couple more commits are in the tank. We'll talk about those guys as well. And there was a mini, for the moment, scare on the baseball side with Skip Johnson's future, but he's extended. We'll break that down a little bit on the back end, too, kind of what all happened there that led to Skip Johnson's extension to remain at Oklahoma. But like we said, guys, let's start with they're in the SEC finally. It's kind of crazy because, it's been 3 years of, and Joe Castiglione kind of talked about this yesterday. Full press conference is on the YouTube channel, by the way. But Joe C kind of talked about it yesterday where it's been just years of this thing down the road, like what that's going to be like when we get there, and how is Oklahoma ready for it, and all this stuff. And it's actually here now. It's official. They're in the SEC. The SEC logos are all over campus. They're in the league now. I'll open the floor from there as far as what kind of stuck out to you guys from yesterday, whether it's the press conference, just the day's festivities, just kind of the last 3 years, whatever direction you want to go with it, feel free, because it's such a historic thing. It's kind of hard to fully appreciate it almost in the moment how huge this is. College sports has changed forever, officially, really yesterday. Kind of wild.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest things is you talk about college sports changing, and this is something that they, not just the move to the SEC, they've obviously known for 3 years was going to happen, but both Joe Castiglione and Joe Harris spoke about just how to navigate the changing world of college athletics, which they kind of forecasted several years ago when the Alston case at the Supreme Court had that unanimous decision. The arrival of NIL, you see conference realignment started happening, and now starting next year there's going to be revenue. As early as next year there's going to be revenue sharing with athletes too, and it was about how do you project forward to kind of be able to continue to operate at the level you are. I think Oklahoma, the one thing that really stood out is, it's a program, it's an athletics department that is self-sufficient. It's not subsidized by outside sources or, student fees or anything like that. And that's something that, Oklahoma has said is very important to it and it wants to continue. And that's part of why it explored this option of going toward the SEC. Because, they conducted some in-house studies that basically said, on their current track with the Big 12, they would have been able to remain self-sufficient through, I think, 27, 28, 29, something like that. But this move to the SEC helps them kind of stabilize that. They have a model of stability, I think was the term that Joe C. Really used moving forward. And, don't know what the finances are going to look like this first year in the SEC. We'll find out, next summer when the SEC announces its, distributions for the 16 teams. But you just look at where the SEC is. It's coming off a year where it made, I think, $680 million that it distributed among its 14 teams this past year. Moving forward, it's got a new $3 billion 10-year deal for media rights with the SEC or with ESPN. It's a conference that is continuing to find ways to generate more revenue, which you need to do because you're going to have to start finding $30 million more a year to allocate to athletes. And expenses are rising. You got to find ways to offset those with more revenue. And I think that was kind of just the big thing that kind of like stood out to me. It's like, it's not just about going to the SEC to be able to compete in the top conference. It is, it's a move to financially stabilize what has been a very successful athletics department that has won multiple national championships in multiple sports, obviously football, softball, gymnastics, those have kind of led the way on that front. But to be able to maintain it, because we know that football and men's basketball are the revenue generating sports, but you still want to be able to, maintain and field all these other, non-revenue sports that are bringing success and other accolades to your school, to your program, to your university.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, so what I've learned, like playing baseball in high school baseball, my baseball coach would always talk about never remaining complacent. Even when you're at the top, don't remain complacent. And so it's kind of cool to hear that OU thought about all of this about 10 years ago. They mentioned it a couple of times. It was a decade ago. They were really thinking about moving forward. And so you think about the blue blood programs that are out there and how they remain at the top is they continue to adapt to what's going on. And OU saw it a very long time ago. And so that I thought that was pretty cool, hearing that this took place a lot longer than even we were even notified of it. So things like that are really good. They did a full contract with the Big 12. They made sure they left on good terms and as best they could. So I appreciate that as well. And so they did everything they needed to do here. I mean, this is a big move for OU. As we talked about, it's not only good, financially, it's good competitively and things like that. You want to remain as one of those top schools, and the public eye is going to see you like that because you're in the SEC now. And you've had the resume that you did in the Big 12, where you had, 14 Big 12 championships in football and things like that. So you had the most overall, and you add that to this. So you can continue to be one of the front runners, for college football, instead of being somebody that had to react it late to the news and things like that, to college realignment. They tried to be one of the front runners for it, and I think it's going to serve out well for them. So I really like what I heard yesterday.
Yeah, and just to provide a little more context to what James was saying about kind of that decade timeline. It's not like they were having discussions with the SEC a decade ago.
Yeah.
But when Missouri, when Texas A&M, what that last round of realignment, when those teams left the Big 12, Joe C and the athletics department had to kind of start thinking forward and thinking what the future might look like. And that's when they started looking at, certain studies and kind of projecting forward. The thing with the SEC, as we all know, didn't really come together until, 2021. And then it happened pretty quickly from there. And it seems like it's been forever since that happened, but we're finally here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, you guys might remember, it was well over a decade ago that there was this master plan of a bunch of Big 12 teams to maybe go out west and form the Pac-16 at one certain time. That ended up not happening. But so it's sort of kind of always been, on the, with the fringe, the radar as a possibility. Yeah. I'm glad James said that because, Joe C talked about that yesterday is, so many things in really society, but especially in sports, college sports, whatever, are very reactionary or very, this is happening, let's adapt, let's figure it out. This was all very proactive. Oklahoma and Texas really they started this whole, college sports. I think, what was it yesterday? It's like 30-something teams are changing conferences this offseason. Like, this is a massive shift. Wow. It all really started with Oklahoma. If you want to back it up, you could say it all started with A&M, Missouri, Nebraska, whatever. But this iteration, Oklahoma and Texas really got the ball rolling on that. And so, it is kind of interesting to hear from the perspective, and this is kind of the most they've been really willing to talk about it since it's official, and how proactive this all was. And, it's very, very interesting. Greg Sankey, too, we were just talking before we started recording. Obviously, Tom has during his history covering Auburn, but hadn't really got to listen to him or get with him in a press conference format like that for any kind of extended period. Obviously, Oklahoma doesn't play in his league. Now they do. And, it was very interesting to kind of hear him talk about the perspective from the SEC in terms of what Oklahoma brings to the table. Because there is so much, it's so obvious. We've talked about it a million times why Oklahoma's making the move. But what does it do for the SEC to add Oklahoma and Texas? And him just kind of talk about that seamless fit was the word he used, bringing Oklahoma in, that they just match up right in line with all the other SEC schools. So I'm going to ask you guys, and Tom, we'll start with you since you have the SEC background. You've been around the conference for a long time. The cliched question that brings up all the time, is OU SEC ready? Yeah. Where are you at on that as we get here? We're in July. It's go time. It's happening whether they are or not. But from your perspective, these last few years, everything they've done, from where the coaching staff hires, whatever, how do you feel like Oklahoma is prepared for this as it's finally time, and it's going to be here in 59 days, like I said?
Yeah, I think Oklahoma across most of its sports is well adapted for this. I think the key phrase from Greg Sankey that really stood out to me was when he was asked what does Oklahoma do for the SEC. He said a rising tide lifts all ships. This is a program that has been successful in various sports and has sustained success in multiple sports. I think one of the other things that was really telling was, when Joe C was on SEC Now yesterday, he talked about how, when they were considering this move, he discussed it with, all the coaches at Oklahoma.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
And all of them were super excited and on board about it. And then he said, and those that aren't here anymore. Throwing a little shade at a coach we may know who he is referring to there. But no, I think it's telling in just, how Oklahoma has handled everything the last few years, how it's been proactive with certain things, obviously, bringing in Brent Venables and how he's kind of rebuilt the program up from where it was when he took over. I think they are well positioned to compete in the SEC this fall. Obviously, it's a difficult schedule. We've talked about that. Some unanswered questions for this team heading into its first SEC season, but it's a team that's going to be well positioned to hopefully compete in this league and try to vie for a playoff spot. Joe C and Joe Harris talked about yesterday, when assessing kind of the long-term future of Oklahoma athletics when they were making this move, one of the things that they prioritized was, we want to contend for championships across every sport, not just make it to, the playoff, not just make it to the final series, but they want to win championships. And they feel like this move has positioned them well enough to be able to do that at a sustained level.
I want to hop in just because Tom mentioned. I had the quote ready because I knew it would come up. So Josie was on SEC Now. Yeah, like Tom said, and he's the exact quote. I will tell you without reservation, every coach we talked to was excited. And you know what? The ones that aren't here anymore. He kind of said with a laugh. And he said it later. He said, "This is Oklahoma. Either get with it or get on with it." So yeah, little shade there probably at Lincoln Riley, which has just kind of confirmed what a lot of people have joked about, that he avoided the SEC. And obviously there's been reports this offseason of USC trying to get out of some of their SEC games. They're trying to get out of playing LSU this year. They have a series with Ole Miss that they did get out of. But kind of funny. He was feeling good yesterday. The vibes were high. He said, "Well, I'm just going to let this go. Well, I'm going to let this fly. So why not?"
Mm-hmm.
But pretty good stuff right there.
Yeah, I'll let you handle the Lincoln Riley slander. I don't really know. I didn't know the guy, so I don't want to jump too much into that. But yeah, I thought it was pretty funny just because Joe Castiglione seems like, as you said, he was feeling good yesterday. But in terms of the SEC question, I always thought it was kind of weird when you think about. I don't care which conference it would have been. If you have a team that's historically number 1 or number 2 in their respective conference, to say they couldn't compete in another conference never really made much sense. So for me, being SEC ready is, can you compete in that conference and stay above 500, things like that? Be one of those teams that are respected in that conference. I don't see why OU or even Texas couldn't handle that type of a deal in the SEC. We always talked about building the defensive line and the offensive line that you need, which I think both teams have gone out and done that because of how well they've done in their other conference. They know how to win. It's not like these programs just accidentally won all these championships and things like that. It wouldn't matter if you came out of the ACC or anything. Like, you're going to win. You're going to be competitive in a new conference regardless. So I think you could think of it that way. That's how I always thought about it. And as Tom said, you don't want to forget about the other sports. There's a lot of sports across Oklahoma that are historically competing for national championships and things like that, not just the Big 12 titles. So I think they're going to be fine regardless. I think what we've seen on the football side of how they've handled this, we want to talk about recruiting here in just a minute, but it's been a really good recruiting cycle for them and things like that. So they're getting ready, obviously, in terms of what they need to compete in this very vast league of – this is the most teams in any conference now, right? 16 overall.
Well, Big Ten's got more now.
Okay.
They added. Okay. They got 18 now, right?
I think so.
Okay. Well, yeah, but you look at it like that. So you see all these teams. You got to get ready for that, like, long schedule, pretty much, is what you're kind of do at this point. But when you know how to win, you know how to win. I think that's what my point is. You know how to do it. So that's just what I think.
Yeah, and I think one of the kind of the more important things for Oklahoma, like, obviously you've been very successful in the Big 12. But the kind of the style of play in the SEC, especially as it relates to football, is different. Oklahoma's going to face tougher defenses than it did in the Big 12. It might not necessarily face as high-powered offenses all the time. Though the SEC certainly has some teams with really good offenses, but it's going to be tougher to score points some, and you need to put a bigger emphasis on defense. And I think that's kind of what they've been able to do so far. We've seen that from year 1 to year 2 with Brent Venables. We expect to see that trend kind of continue going into year 3. Obviously, this year we kind of all expect that defense to be the backbone of this team this year. Not that the offense is going to be any slouch, but the offense is going to have to work through some things with a new offensive coordinator, new quarterback, new look offensive line. But that defense is going to be what makes the difference for Oklahoma in the SEC. Mm-hmm. Whereas in the Big 12, they could just go out there and not score anybody for pretty much their entire run in there. So I do think, like James said, winning is winning. When you kind of have that history of being able to compete, that's going to carry over. You know what you're doing. You have a kind of instilled culture, so to speak. It's just a matter of how you're able to do it and being able to adjust to new obstacles, new challenges that they're going to face in the SEC. And I do think that they're positioned well to be able to do that.
And that's the thing, too. I don't think the Big 12 has historically just had bad defenses overall. I think it's over the last decade or so, I think, in that time span. And I think OU was kind of the trendsetter for that because they were showing that you could still win like that with just the higher powered offense. And so a lot of the other teams had to follow suit. I mean, you saw across the whole Big 12, the defenses were down because the offenses got so good. I think Texas Tech actually should get the credit for that because they had that air raid offense and things like that. But when you see that you can win that way, that's what happens. I think so. Once you go to different conferences, it's just a style of play, as Tom said. You focus more on the line of scrimmage and things like that. So, and I think you can do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a broad question. Is OU SEC ready? That doesn't really have a broad answer. It's case by case, like anything. You take a look at each sport. I mean, I would say football, definitely. The way they're recruiting right now and the way that Brent Venables is constructing the roster, building from the trenches out, which is, we've talked about that a bunch of times, what you have to do, especially in that league to win at a high level, and continuing to stack high recruiting classes. You look at the facilities and the fan support and the investment, all of that is there in football. Oklahoma's going to be just fine. There has been this sense, I think, for a while, the last few years, from the SEC end of it, that, Oklahoma's not, they're going to go into the SEC and they're just going to get chewed up and spit out. And it's like, I mean, are they going to win the league 6 years in a row like they did earlier this decade? Obviously not. That's not going to happen in the SEC. But they're going to be fine. Okay, they're not going to fall into irrelevance. They'll be fine. The other sports, it's more case by case. Softball, clearly they're going to be fine. Baseball, the product on the field is where it needs to be, but the investment outside of it needs to improve. And we'll talk about that a little more in just a little bit. But facility, stadium, things like that needs to improve. Basketball, obviously, not where it needs to be either. You know what I mean? So it's case by case.
Women's basketball is good.
Sure, but the facility, the arena.
Oh, yeah, your facilities. Okay. Yeah,
the product on the court, yeah. The arena. The facilities for you basketball, I think the locker rooms and Blake Griffin, I think all that stuff is pretty comparable to a lot of the better, but the arena itself, well documented. Yeah. A little behind the times. But yeah, it's case by case. But I do think Oklahoma as well. I agree with Greg Sankey on the high front of that the fit is going to be pretty good. I think that it won't take long. It'll be weird at first, but I think that after a year or two, it'll feel kind of weird if they ever weren't in the SEC. I think after some time, it'll be this is how it should have always been. It feels right. That's how I think it'll go. So it's wild. It's really cool, and it's great. These last few years, it's been just building toward it, and it's finally there. It's still weird. For now to see even the press conference backdrop having the SEC logo on it. It's weird right now, but
felt familiar to me.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you're used to it. We got SEC Media Days coming up in a couple of weeks, less than 2 weeks, and we're all going to be there. The three of us and Colin Kennedy will all be there, so it'll be a full boat. That'll be our first real full SEC thing, and looking forward to that. But it's getting real. We're finally getting close to getting this thing started. It's very exciting. Yesterday was really cool day in Norman all day long. So we'll see. We'll go from there. All right, we'll shift over a little bit of recruiting stuff. Oklahoma has stayed hot. They've been on a hot run, this is what always happens. And we talked about this with Colin a bunch of times. We mentioned it with the three of us, that the recruiting calendar under Brent Venables, right around this time, post-Champion Barbecue, is where they just get hot. And it's what they've done every summer since he's been here, and it's happening again. 2 more commits since the last show earlier this week and back in last week. We'll start with chronological order. I guess I'll just bring them both up. Darius Afalava, 3-star offensive lineman from Utah. Obviously, a very solid offensive line group being put together right now by Bill Bedenbaugh, and he's still hunting some other huge names that we've talked about on the show a few times. And then just yesterday, Cortez Mills, Emmett Jones keeps it going. We mentioned him on the show a couple of times. Elite wide receiver prospect from Florida. He's a 4-star, he's a borderline 5-star. He might get there by the time he actually signs at Oklahoma. He committed yesterday. He's the 5th receiver in that group now with Emmett Jones. Just a ridiculous group. So, guys, Oklahoma State's hot. Offensive line wide out. I mean, this 25 class is shaping up really, really nicely, and 2 more big hits here for Oklahoma.
Yeah, I mean, it's a top 5 class right now in the composite. It's obviously where you want to be, because you want to maintain that blue chip ratio. You want to stack talent and, compete with the Georgias, the Alabamas, the LSUs, the Texas A&Ms, and outside the league, the Ohio States, teams like that are, perpetually just killing it on the recruiting trail. But, and I feel like we've said this like the last 3 or 4 shows talking about Emmett Jones.
I know, it's crazy.
But now that he's got Cortez Mills on board, I just want to run through what Emmett Jones has been able to do with that wide receiver room, just in terms of amassing talent since he was hired. 18 months ago? He was hired January 10th, 2023.
Yeah, it was right after the 22
season. So 18 months ago, 2024 class signed 3 4-star wide receivers: Zion Kearney, Ivan Carrion, Zion Reagans, and 3-star wide receiver KJ Daniels. In the portal, got Andrew Anthony from Michigan, Brandon Thompson from Texas. Obviously, Andrew Anthony, before he tore his ACL, was the number 1 receiver on that team for the first half of the season. Mm-hmm. Brandon Thompson was slowed by some hamstring issues, but still, we've seen what he's capable to do with the deep ball. So far in the 2025 class, 4-star receivers: Elijah Thomas, Marcus Harris, Cortez Mills, Grayson Harris. Add 3-star Manny Choice, who they just got. 3 of those 4-star guys are top 17 at their position right now. And like you mentioned, Cortez Mills, could be a 5-star when this is all said and done. Oh, and he added Deion Burks in the transfer portal this past offseason. Right. A guy who we think could be the best playmaker on that offense this season. That's just a ridiculous amount of talent that he's acquired in a very short time. I mean, that's 12 wide receivers he's brought in 17.
I mentioned to Colin the other day, but this 25 class had Jade Nickens in it, and they lost Jade Nickens, and they're still with this group, which is
Yeah, I mean, it's just absurd, the level of talent he's been able to bring in. And obviously we've seen the development on the field with a lot of those guys, because there were question marks about that position going into last season. And now, it's arguably the strongest position on this team, at least on the offensive side of the ball it is. So again, we sung Emmett Jones's praises every show for the last month. And it still feels like it's not enough with what he's been able to do and what he continues to do on the recruiting trail with that wide receiver room. So, I mean, I just remain in awe of it right now.
Yeah, I feel like we've spoken enough on Emmett Jones, man. It's it's insane what he's doing. So I'll say good for Coach Bill Bedenbaugh to get his guy too. 6'5", 320 on the offensive line. I mean, that's really good. We talked about revamping that offensive line and things like that. And it seems like he's getting it right here with this guy out of Utah. And so it's good. I mean, overall, you look at Darius's film. I kind of looked at it a little bit before we went on. It's he's a very physical guy. And I think that's really, really good, especially for what he wants to do in this SEC. So that's really good. A really good pickup for Bill Bedenbaugh. And the Cortez Mills thing, I read Tom Lloyd's story just to see what he talked about with him. He told him that he was still going to take visits. Now that was kind of weird to me because of what Brent Venables is his philosophy is on committing. When you committed, you're committed. You're not supposed to take another visit. So I thought that was kind of weird. I'm not sure what's going on with that, or how that appeared to happen. Maybe he's misinformed on what he's allowed to do, but I don't know. That seemed kind of weird to me.
I think we saw something similar last cycle. I can't remember what recruit, but I believe it was. I think Colin touched on it on the board, but it's in kind of the same vein of he's going to be tagging along with some of his like high school teammates on their visits just to like experience.
Okay.
Where it's not so much him taking official visits. I could be mistaken there, but I think that's kind of my read and my understanding of the situation. Yeah. Because, like you said, we kind of know what Brent Venables' policy is when a guy commits. I mean, you're all in.
Yeah.
You're poker chip. You're shutting down your recruitment basically.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think it'll be interesting to kind of see how that plays out in terms of that. But
yeah, we've seen guys get like special permission before too, so maybe they're on the same page there. Who knows? Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, as far as Bill Beatonbow, kind of quietly putting together a nice 25 group, because you have Ryan Fogey, who's one of the highest rated guys in this class. He's just behind CJ Nixon right now for their highest rate, if you want to go by their metric. And then you also had Owen Hollenbeck already, and you add, Afalava in, and they're still chasing these other major 5-star guys. Michael Fasusu talked about, Lamont Rogers. Those are guys that they feel like they have a good shot at. So those are 5-star. I mean, those are elite talents. So you have these 3 dudes already in. You're close. You're not there, obviously, because you need to cap it off with these 5, but you're on the cusp of a really, really good offensive line group in 2025. And obviously Bill Beatonbow, after the vast amount of turnover, I don't want to say fans were frustrated with him, but there was a little bit of like, what this stinks. Offensive line had to kind of just reset completely. Quite the bounce back if you can sign a class like that after the one you just had, which has some really highly touted prospects in it as well, like Eddie Pierre-Louis, guys we talked about before there as well. So, offensive line group really coming together kind of nicely in 2025. So, a couple of very good gets here, obviously. In that 25 group, like Tom said, top 5 right now. And it's got 20 commits in and a few more hanging out there they're chasing. And it's a really good group being put together right now by the staff. And obviously, I'll go ahead and plug Colin in as well. Obviously, he's all over as well as anyone. Be sure to subscribe. Sooners Illustrated. Go VIP member. Colin's got all the goods on the recruiting side of things. They continue to chase some of these other names floating out there.
Running 50% off annual subscriptions right now.
50% off annual subscriptions right now. There you go. I didn't even know that.
Yeah, I didn't know either. I'm glad you said that because I was like, I didn't know it.
We'll close the show with a little bit of baseball. Don't have to go real in depth here. There was a mini scare, if you want to, however you want to phrase it, with Skip Johnson this weekend. So the quick timeline recap here: Texas fired David Pierce, their head coach, on Monday. That was the day of the College World Series finals between Tennessee and Texas A&M. So the timing was obviously, suspect because Texas had been done playing for a couple of weeks already at that point, and it was on the day of the final game. Texas fired David Pierce. Jim Schlossnagle, the head coach of Texas A&M, lost the Natty and was in Austin being introduced not even a day later. Very Lincoln Riley-esque. Didn't sit real well with the people in College Station. He's in College Station. A lot of people asked me on our VIP board, any concern here with Skip Johnson being a candidate for the job? I honestly did not think so. I really was like, I don't know. I mean, I don't see that as much of a culture fit. I know the relationship between Skip and OU is as good as it's been at any point in the tenure. It's very strong right now. But a couple days go by. It looks like Skip's going to get an extension. Not a lot to be worried about. Nothing to see here. Texas A&M reached out on Friday to Skip. He was one of 6 or 7 coaches that got reached out to. There was a little bit of panic for a short while. A couple of reports, that he was maybe going to take it. He never got offered the gig. He was contacted by Texas A&M. There was conversations. There was interest, but Skip Johnson did not plan to ever leave Oklahoma. He got a nice big contract extension through the 2029 season. Has to get approved with the Board of Regents still, which I think Tommy says in September. So we got a little bit of time to wait on that for like figures and things. But the important part is they kept Skip in for the long haul. On Friday, Skip met with OU, in particular Joe Castiglione, and then the executive associate AD, Greg Tipton, oversees baseball. They had long conversations on campus, long meetings. And while I wasn't there, I don't know the exact, meat of the conversation. You can be rest assured that a big majority of the conversation was beyond just what Skip's contract's going to look like. Because, obviously you want to work out and get yourself as good of a deal as possible. But the more important thing for Skip in this program is the investment going to be where it needs to be moving forward? This goes back to the SEC ready conversation. Oklahoma baseball, the product on the field is where it needs to be. This was a team in the College World Series finals 3 years ago. This past year, they were a top 10 team, hosted a regional, won the Big 12. The product on the field is where it needs to be. The investment off the field is not, at least, from the outside in terms of Edel Mitchell Park is really small. They don't have facilities around that program that are comparable at all to other teams in the SEC, not even close right now. And Skip knows that. The staff knows that. And that's why they're trying to get this thing going. So this whole thing was a very strong, kind of a reaffirmation in the investment in the program. Obviously, Skip and the staff and everybody feels good about the direction it's moving. That's why they re-signed to keep it that way. But a big win for OU baseball to keep Skip. This would have been, and again, it never got that serious, so I don't want to doom and gloom it too much. But if it were to happen, just to play that devil's advocate, horrible for OU baseball to lose Skip to Texas A&M, another team in the same league as you. Talk about a major program setback if that were to happen. And they didn't let it happen. So a major kudos to Joe C. and this athletic department for getting this done and not letting this become a thing, because it would have been bad if it did happen. But Skip Johnson extended in for the long haul and remains at Oklahoma.
Yeah, the timing of it would have been difficult if he had been offered the job and it ultimately taken. You're 2-3 days away from joining a new league and having to replace a coach at a program. It's never an easy task, but to do it kind of during that transitional period would not have been ideal. So to be able to kind of maintain that continuity and continue to build off of what Skip Johnson's been able to do with that program so far as you take this step into the SEC, I think is, like you said, kudos to Joe C, kudos to Skip, kudos to Greg Tipton for, being able to come together and get that done.
Mm-hmm. Baseball is very big in the SEC. It's like one of those tougher
5 straight SEC or 5 straight national champions.
Like, because you say like Vanderbilt, schools like that are even, one of the schools you got to pay attention to in that league. So it's like, so it would have been really bad to lose your head coach right then, because now you got to reassure recruits and things like that. It'd have been really tough, especially with, like you said, like all the antics that were going on with the SEC media, the SEC day, and things like that. So, yes, pretty good they got him.
Yeah, huge. Long term, they probably could have just promote Reggie Willis. He would have been the top candidate right away, and you probably could keep some continuity there together. And I do think Reggie Willis is a future head coach, whether that's at Oklahoma way down the road after Skip or somewhere else or something. I don't know, but I think Oklahoma would have been fine long term. But in the short term, it's July. This was right at the end of June. You're not going to be able to. Odds are a good chunk of the pitching staff would have probably moved on either with Skip to College Station or just look for something different. That was affirmed yesterday. We talked about they added Cameron Johnson from LSU, this great pickup, and it is a huge pickup. It's going to be a big role this year. He didn't announce anything until that contract extension, and then
That's what he said. First line.
Now the dust has settled, I feel comfortable. Because I'm sure that, and again, I don't want to speak for him, but I read in between the lines there.
Yeah.
If Skip had left, he probably would have rethought some things, and maybe, very likely wouldn't have come. And he's one example. I think there's probably a lot more that fall under that umbrella on the pitching side in particular. So
that's a good
huge
point.
In every way. The short term, the long term, all of it. Big deal to keep him in Oklahoma. So big win there. And I know OU baseball fans are very excited because there's always been this question among the diehard OU baseball fans. Does OU really care about baseball? Are they willing to invest in it to compete at a high level? And this is just one thing, but it's a sign that they do. To step up here, extend your guy, keep him. It's a bit of a statement to the fans, and we'll see where it goes from here. That program's got a ton of momentum, and it's going to be exciting. I'm really looking forward to next year. Obviously, SEC and football is king. That's what I'm most looking forward to. But SEC and baseball is going to be really fun too. I'm really excited for that next winter and spring. I think that's it. Again, program reminder, I mentioned this last week. This will be our only show this week. I'm going on vacation, so I'll be back next week with Colin on either Thursday or Friday. So we'll have one show today, this one, and then one show next week. The week after that is SEC Media Days, so I have no idea what our schedule is going to look like then. We'll have content, obviously, and we'll have probably wrap-ups from Dallas and things like that. So there will be content on the YouTube channel as well as on the podcast feed, things like that. But as far as a full formal show after next week, it'll be a little bit of a moving target as we're all going to be down there in Dallas. But look forward to that coming up. And we'll catch you guys then. So it'll be a fun couple of weeks coming up, and fall camp's right around the corner, and we're getting there as we move into July. So that's it for now. For Tom Green, James C. Jackson, I'm Josh Callaway. We'll see you guys next time, right back here next week on the Sooners Illustrated podcast.
See you.